All right, we are right at 5:30, so I'll call tonight's EDA meeting to order. Karen, could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Roberts?
Here.
Commissioner Husnick?
Here.
Commissioner Huntosh? Commissioner Lorge?
Here.
Commissioner Erickson?
Here.
Commissioner Finneman? Here. And President Bain.
Here. I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Members of the EDA, we have an agenda before you this evening. I will entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and our agenda is approved. Our first item this evening is the election of officers, and typically we would hold this on the first, on our first meeting of, upon reconvening upon the new year, and we had some additional appointments to go through council approval. Those appointments are all in place. Pause for a couple of canceled and switched meetings, and so here we are now at the end of March doing election of officers. And Dan, do you just want to walk us through the positions that need to be covered this evening?
Yep, President, members of the EDA, this is a requirement of the EDA's bylaws that every year we go through and elect officers for the EDA. Included in your packet material is the list of the current offices that the EDA has and the current office holders. So tonight we're looking for motions to approve or vote in a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and assistant treasurer are the 5 positions that are outlined in the EDA's bylaws. And so we need a separate motion for each one of those to elect a office holder for each one of those 5 positions. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the EDA has regarding that structure.
Any questions about what the mission is for this evening? All right, and as Dan mentioned, that there are 5 different positions need to be nominated and approved this evening, and I am happy to either do individual nominations if we want to go through these one by one, or if somebody wanted to make a motion for a full slate, we could cover it in one motion as well. It's really up to the individual members. Go ahead.
I won't be party to the positions of any of them. I'll be with it as long as we.
And I'm still disappointed to hear that, but understand. And so we do have an open secretary position. So something to consider this evening. Do we want to go through individually one by one? Do we want to, somebody want to propose a full slate of candidates? Always a little awkward.
So except for the secretary's position, would be the only one that would be questionable or
Correct.
questioned or.
Correct, and so we could nominate a replacement secretary, or
Yeah.
I am open if folks want to reshuffle the deck, we want to keep things the way they are. I am open to feedback from the group.
Marla, I am abstaining.
You actually can vote, you are still a member of the EDA, and so you are able to vote on this item. Or suggest, and also nominate candidates as well.
Well, I'd make a motion that we leave things the way they are, except for the fact that we're going to be looking for a new secretary, so.
Any other feedback on that? I guess in point of feedback, if Member Lorge would be interested in filling the secretary role. Open to?
I would be open to that when Mark is done.
And Dan, could we do that? Could we nominate officers until Member Finneman resigns his position, and then election? He is technically still a.
Yeah, you're technically still on the EDA, so you could technically keep the position until you resign, then to be open, and you could move Commissioner Lorge in. But you'd have to hold it, once that seat's reappointed, you'd have to do another election of officers for the secretary position.
The honest that comes with being secretary is overwhelming.
There is also that. We are heavily dependent on staff for these roles. I will say these positions become very important as we look into the authority that's granted to the EDA and ultimate decisions that are made by the EDA. But Member Finneman's point, staff does give us the benefit of doing most of the actual footwork for most of these positions, so. Would you be open to staying as secretary until you're ready to depart?
Oh, yes, works for me.
Okay.
Sure.
So we had, do you want to amend your?
I would amend my motion then that we would leave things as they are and allow Mr. Finneman to act as secretary until he departs through, and we don't really know exactly what that date's going to be, and then hold a new election for secretary only after that.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Can we make it more cringy? All right. Thanks, everybody. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and motion carries. Thank you all. Our next item this evening is to approve the minutes from the March 14th regular EDA meeting. And I will entertain a motion or any changes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the March 14th, 2022 regular EDA meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
One abstention. Two abstentions.
I'm sorry, who was the first?
Abstentions from Finneman and Roberts. And motion carries. All right, moving on to Downtown Plan Amendment 1. And Dan, I believe you're taking us through this.
President, members of the EDA, on the dais before you is the HKGI Downtown Planning Addendum Number 1. As we have gone through our downtown planning process, we've identified this area as the one that's probably most likely to redevelop first. And as such, we've identified a need to do some additional planning activities surrounding this particular quadrant. If you recall back in the directives, the planner has basically broken downtown into 4 quadrants: northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. This is for the southeast quadrant, which is the area just immediately east of Lake Street and south of Broadway. So it's the area that you see here on the map. It's this entire a parcel right here. This is, the one in looking at it that probably is going to be, one of the first sections to see some redevelopment happen on it. It's also one that has a mix of publicly owned land and privately owned land. So there's some planning challenges that are here. So we are asking, or did ask HKGI to provide an additional scope of work to kind of get a better understanding of how a redevelopment here fits into the overall scope of our downtown plan. One thing that this additional work will do is that this will really help the city to clearly identify what the city's goals and needs are in any redevelopment that happens. Looking at that from like an infrastructure perspective, parking. So when a redevelopment does come forward, we know what the city's parking needs are, what a city's infrastructure needs are. One way to kind of look at this addendum is that if you're doing a set of house plans, like the downtown plan is basically sort of the shell. It's the framing plan for the house. And this is sort of like adding the electrical. And you can still see like the downtown plan itself is more of the framework for the entire downtown. Now we're starting to focus on a little bit more specific, getting down to a little bit more granular level. And we're basically preparing for when redevelopment does happen down here. We're able to go into those redevelopment meetings with a better understanding of how any redevelopment down here fits into the whole downtown plan. So we're not sort of having this downtown planning process come forward, a redevelopment comes in, and then having to sort of work to mash those up. This will give us a better overall planning document. Total cost of the additional work is not to exceed $6,500. It's capped at $6,500. And the delivery of this additional scope will coincide with the downtown approval. When we get your final plan done, this will be a part of that plan. So it won't be like an additional addendum that's down the road. They'll work to get this done as the downtown plan does finalize. And after we get this one done, if other quadrants, start to see needs for redevelopment, we can start looking at some additional scopes for those quadrants as well. But for right now, staff is recommending the approval of the downtown planning addendum number 1 with HKGI with the not to exceed of $6,500. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the EDA has on the addendum.
And members of the general.
Could you voice what the additional work would be?
Yeah, they're doing some concept, like taking a look at how, how is traffic going to flow through a redevelopment that comes through here? How are, main issue on here too is like, what are the parking requirements currently? If you go back to the downtown plan directives, there's sort of a high level overview of parking. We're looking at what are parking requirements here and what challenge would a redevelopment bring in for, additional parking needs, demands, et cetera. So getting it a little bit more down into actually what, a redevelopment here, what that impact would be. There is going to be a little bit of a spillover, when we talk parking requirements, for example, there, you have to factor in, that use that Arts in the Park brings, so how does that kind of factor in? So you are going to see a bit more of a parking detail that comes out of it. And then just some additional site work in terms of like, how does, like I said, traffic flow, pedestrian flow, a little bit more analysis done on that as well.
Will they be using the current community input?
Yes, so they'll take sort of, it's basically the nice thing with using the same planning firm, they have all that background data that we currently have, and they'll work to take a look at that and bring that down to the next level. So this quadrant, in the end result of the plan, will have a lot more detail associated with it versus the other three. But this is sort of the one, if we're looking at having a redevelopment happen, this is probably the one block that's going to happen first. So it's advisable to be prepared for those conversations when we have to sit down and start looking at any redevelopment project for this particular project, or for this particular quadrant.
Mark, go ahead.
Well, the frustrating part for me is that I had expected the essence of what we see here in the new work to be part of the old work. Maybe that's why I've been frustrated with Ben. Maybe that's why we've had some of the conversations we've had. But to a great degree, you had to do your own contract with them, so it's got limits, and apparently this is one of the limits you can come after for additional fees. But I really expected that degree of work to be part of the planning process. That's why I've been kind of
Commissioner Finneman, fully understand that, but if you look at the original scope, it is more of the, they weren't doing it on a site-by-site, property-by-property basis. It was more the high-level overview of downtown. And, this does, it's an additional work, it's an additional scope outside that more high-level work.
I understand where you place this and where they place this, and I understand this, the right of the passage here. But I'm frustrated because I did expect this from the first contract.
So appreciate the frustration of what was included in original. This is needed. I do support the.
Based on the contract you probably have with them, there's no argument that you'll probably go ahead with this, but it's just frustrating.
I'd have to agree with that to some degree, because, I thought the whole package deal was going to take care of things,
To this
And
detail.
so, to this detail, right? And so it's a bit of a bitter pill for sure. I'm not, unless I missed something along the way. So the original contract, we'd have to take a little harder look at that.
And we did review the original scope. And they are sticking to that original scope. This isn't anything that they're not fulfilling that original scope of work. This is, those secondary, those more, in-depth views. And the struggle is you have to you have a large geographical area here that we were studying. So at what point, you have to put some boundaries up, and that's what we had with the original scope that was approved for our downtown planning process.
Maybe just a little bit of a history. So is this basically is because of the potential GONE project or GONE partnership on that whole block? Is that why this is coming forward right now? And they've been aware of this since kind of day one, I think. And so just maybe
actually you beat me to the punch here a little bit. This not only does it do this quadrant, but it's going to help us through a possible redevelopment of that block, that we will need that help to determine what any redevelopment fits there, how the traffic patterns, like Dan said, go through there, how parking is related to it. We don't have a solid or any particular solid development proposal as of yet, but we have a concept, and we need help. We will need the assistance to go through some of that because it's a very difficult spot to redevelop.
Is this more cost better than having, say, Bolton and Mink help us through that process? Because we.
Yeah, Sorry. didn't
Well,
mean to
just,
interrupt
I
you.
just, just because this is downtown and we, other major, large developments, we've not had a consultant come in and help us through
Yeah,
this, so.
Bolton and Mank will be, of course, as they are always involved with this, but we want to make sure that you spent a lot of money and time on a downtown plan. We want to make sure that this block or this quadrant is in keeping with the concepts that you've come up with the downtown plan. So it's a little bit more high level, and how does things work so that it's not like a purple grape in the middle, right? So it's really just trying to make sure that you follow what ultimately is going to be your downtown plan and make sure this fits the right place.
I wouldn't argue the idea that more work that has to be done. Contracts would dictate how this happens. Doesn't still take the stress away from the idea that some might presume that was.
Again, this is leaning more on a specific development at this point.
Just to piggyback off that, I mean, this additional scope is not for us to design any potential redevelopment. We're not going into this saying we're going to redesign the private side of it. This is sort of how does any potential redevelopment fit into this quadrant as a whole, which then fits into the whole downtown plan. So it's sort of, this isn't, us taking on the private side and making, in doing hard, engineering or redevelopment or planning work on that. It's more on the whole quadrant. So it will help to enlighten what this quadrant is, and when the project comes forward, we'll know how it fits into not only the quadrant, but like Pat said, the entire downtown as a whole, to make sure the plan still stays cohesive. Go ahead.
Here's my expectations again. I would think that the only way you really talk about these pieces of property is to acknowledge the various components of the design. And that means you're going to sort of draw a functionary plan. Maybe it's option A and B that I would read in here. And it seems to me if you don't do that and use the logic of what's going to happen there, you're not getting the information you need. So again, we need the service. We don't have.
I do think, oh, go ahead.
The only question I had is that apparently then the downtown planners, that they would meet directly with the proposed, the developers, for instance? Would they meet with those folks or the builders or whatever? I mean, or is this a direct contact between them and?
I think part of that scope would be to have the planners meet with a development during the concept phase, not construction drawings.
Well, it seems
or
to make
design.
sense to do that.
Yeah, and the other reason this is so difficult is because the nature of the development or the nature of the area with the city street and city parking and the city-owned lots, it's all going to be very interesting trying to put all this together, and we need a little bit more assistance on the concept of it before we get to the drawings and whether it's capable. And this committee and the community have talked about parking over and over, and trying to put parking in here is incredibly difficult as well. So we need a little bit more assistance at the concept so that if we believe the concept can go forward, then we can get to the next steps.
Absolutely why. Service, but well, let it go at that. I'm actually not.
Yeah, and you made the comment that our original plan and scope of work was kind of like, how do you say it, like the shell of the house, and this is the electrical system. So is there anything else that we're missing?
Not for this, at this particular point, it's not to say down the road, if we get, say, southwest quadrant pressure, it's always advisable just to go back to that, HKGI and be like, hey, if it's a simple, one lot development, that's maybe not something that requires this level of analysis, but when you have as many moving parts as you currently do on the southeast quadrant in terms of the context, not only of the downtown, but the downtown plan, it's advisable to make that additional investment just to make sure that this current development doesn't create a roadblock down the road. Like if you look sort of as downtown in general, it's been very focused on individual developments, not versus the big picture of how this whole thing, all these pieces have to fit together. By doing this particular quadrant, you're getting that next level of detail down to make sure this piece fits into the next piece. But for right now, I don't anticipate the need, at least short term, to really do any additional scoping. That's not to say if all of a sudden 5 more large projects potentially come knocking on the door, that may change. but for right now, this is the one piece that we see need for.
Would point back to our original conversations with HKGI. One of the things we liked about them is a lot of their city clients are long-term clients, and recognizing that this is a process and that bringing them in for future phases as there's more specific kind of specificity of the plan is something that they do offer. And so personally, I've kind of held out that there would be these types of add-ons that come through. I do appreciate the level of detail and kind of the question of, are we getting the value of what we paid initially? And I think we should continue to challenge that. But what seals this as a need in my mind is if you look at bullet point 3, the last sentence, head bike vehicle circulation. So we're talking about circulation of both pedestrians and traffic. That's been a hot topic of conversation throughout the plan, and this particular project puts an emphasis and a need if we're going to talk about, multifamily housing in that particular site, mixed with some, significant redevelopment of restaurant or retail or whatever that might look like. There's a specific, pretty specific traffic need that's needed right on that site that I do think is worth taking a deeper look into beyond what we've done for the overall downtown plan. And then also we've talked about streetscape, and this is, going to be right in the middle and a great opportunity to kind of then take what we've already said about streetscape and apply it specifically to that property, and then parking as well. And so I think I look at this as just another layer of detail to make sure that we're holding things together. If nothing else, to have some point of reference when this body and also council is going to make a future project decision, that we're kind of keeping the, immediate development aligned with what a potential plan might look like. And then also, if there's trade-offs, we know what those trade-offs are, and we've been thoughtful about that process. So, so I support this, but also appreciate the caution that, we need to make sure that we're continuing to push to get the value that we wanted out of the overall plan.
Yeah, we don't want this thing to turn into a habit, with addendums and that kind of thing. And, if we're getting our dollars worth, it's a different story. But, I just agree with Mark, or I agree with Mark in the fact that it should be questioned and find out, to what end are we paying extra for, that kind of thing, so.
And I think to that, the value side of it, if you look, to date, we have 11 directives for downtown, that overall fit the entirety of downtown. And if I just compare those 11 directives to some other downtown plans that I've seen, other downtown plans don't have probably half that number of overall directives. So I think they've been pretty robust in terms of the number of directives. They're still working on the executables for that. So we still haven't seen what the list of all of those are going to be. And as well, we're going to get a CIP, so we are going to get, I think, a very good value for what the investment that we're making into that, downtown plan. And I think even with the addendum, with the additional scope, if we're looking at a possible redevelopment down there, that is the intent of the plan, is to start to encourage redevelopment of downtown. So I think you're already starting to see some of them come back with the fact that, we are going to have, a possible, redevelopment happen in the downtown area. I think that starts to show some of that return on that overall planning process. But I think just in terms of overall value from the scope, I think I've been pleasantly surprised with the quality and just the overall volume of work that they've produced, for the city. And I think, we could have gone through and done, a lot more site-specific planning in there, but I think that document then would just become, so unruly and based potentially not in what the market would actually bear, that it tends to lose a little bit of viability. I think the fact that it has been sort of this framework plan that we then fill in the pieces as they come forward, I think creates a more viable plan from a development standpoint, because then we're doing that next level planning in hand with the developers, with the market. So when those plans get done, that next level detail has a little bit more validity than just sort of a tabletop design shred exercise, which are great to sort of get that long-term vision, but they may not be great in terms of having the market bear that. And that is reflected when I've talked to the developers at conferences. They always said they have a love-hate relationship with downtown plans, because they love the fact that it shows the city's got some vision for the next 10, 15, 20 years. But they said certain parcels, if they get tied up in the design charrette, the community gets sort of married to an idea that the market may never bear. And they said that sort of then can create an artificial barrier for them to actually have that development happen. So it's a very fine line of like how far down do you want to get in a downtown plan? Because some developers will come in and say, you know, I can never build that because the market's never going to bear it, but the city or the board want that there because the plan dictates it. So it's sort of a chicken and egg argument.
Bottom line is it has to get done, work has to be done, so I favor the fact that the works get to that level. I presume we're gonna see actual thoughts about the inhabitants and what business. That'll generate a form, which will generate a, you know, so I'm gonna see it, I'd probably see it come into more plan form. So I'm all in favor.
And the actual deliverables that get created here, so the last bullet point, there's written directives that get added as an accompaniment and perhaps some graphics into the downtown plan, and then up to 2 presentations. Is that coming, who's the audience, is there an intended audience for those presentations? Is it back here to the EDA? Is it to the downtown plan?
It'll go back to it'll become, those presentations will get incorporated back into the downtown plan. So if you see the 11 directives, it'll be like 12 now. They'll have the one that's specific to this quadrant, which will sort of stand alone, you know, but it'll all come, those presentations will happen as part of our normal downtown planning process. Because again, they're looking for the deliverable date to get this incorporated in the final design for the plan. So you'll see those come forward at a future downtown committee meeting.
Comments, other comments, questions? Requests of Dan? Dan, it sounds like they get started on this as soon as it's approved. Is that
Yes.
the timeline?
Yeah, they are basically right now waiting for the word go, and then once they're gonna go, they're gonna get this additional scope worked into their deliverables for the downtown planning process.
Does this addendum go directly to them without the city council?
Yes, it goes directly to them. Yeah, it's an EDA. This is an EDA-led project, so this is, the approval is here at the EDA level.
Just want to know.
And fully funded by the EDA,
Correct.
and, okay.
And to that point, there is, with the delayed in community development director hiring for the first quarter, there's a little bit of budget that was earmarked or was supposed to be spent on that salary that's now free that we can use. So it is in essence, there are available funds to fund this without having to really make any major waves in the EDA's budget for 22.
Ready for a motion? Also happy to entertain other questions too, if that.
I move for approval.
I'll second.
You have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? All right, all those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and motion carries.
There's nothing wrong with asking the question.
Oh, yeah.
All right,
I set a high standard this time.
and we will move on to agenda number 8 this evening, which is the city development update.
I can provide that. So,
Perfect.
President, members of the EDA, I know there's been past conversations of EDA wanting a more frequent update in terms of development and redevelopment in the city of Forest Lake. So I did have Nathan, who's the interim zoning administrator, pull a list of kind of developments and redevelopments that are, on track or have been approved or recently approved or are in process of being reviewed. And I've assembled those here tonight just so the EDA gets a little bit of an idea of what's coming down the pipeline. If you really want to follow the development in Forest Lake, I recommend following the Planning Commission. That's where a lot of these documents will go. So if you really want to see, the actual plans, the actual designs, the Planning Commission's agendas and packet materials does contain all the background information. I'm just kind of providing a summary of where we are. Also, there are projects that are in probably more earlier stage of development that aren't included on this list. This is more the ones that are more formal, that are more likely have received some level of review. So there are additional projects that are sort of still behind the scenes, are still being worked on. What we have here is a list. We have 5 residential subdivisions, which are outlined here. Of course, I didn't. This one's Hidden Creek, right, Ryan?
Yes.
All right. So this one's Hidden Creek. It's out, just for reference, The Headwaters 123 parcel is here. This is the parcel over here. This is about 125 residential housing units that are coming online. These are all single-family detached units that are coming on. So there's 125 units here that are coming on. Then we have Birchwood Estates. Again, I should have labeled these better. So my apologies. That one, Birchwood? Forgot.
To the southeast.
This one? So this is Birchwood Estates. This is a mix of single-family detached and detached townhomes with a homeowners association management. And this is a total of 74 units that are coming online.
How many did you say was on the Taylor properties?
125.
Okay, thank you.
125-ish. Now, obviously, these can go up or down a little bit based on final approvals, but that's just
And then 74?
74 for Birchwood Estates. And then Goodview Preserve is 80-ish units, which is this one right here. That's a mix of single-family detached and attached twin homes with homeowner association management. And then you have, at this point here, you have Shadow Creek, which has had some concept reviews. This is sort of still pretty fluid in terms of what this will look like, but just want to know the Planning Commission has reviewed some concepts for Shadow Creek. And then there's Teets Farm, which I believe is for
How many is Shadow Creek?
Unknown-
We're doing
unknown
math
at this
up
point.
here.
unknown at this
It-
point.
Unknown.
The concept's still pretty hazy right now.
Okay.
Proposed project would require a comp plan amendment, and there's some lengthy time period to that, so the developer might propose something different that would meet the current zoning, so it's kind of up in the air still at this point. Eats Farm is off of County Road 50, off of, so northeast of here, off of Imperial and 197th east. It's right on the east side of the screen right now. Top,
Okay.
right there to the east. Up a little more. That's a cul-de-sac. Now follow that back to Imperial.
Okay.
So it's all that open acreage to the east.
Right here?
They're combining several lots in there to basically prepare for large home sites a family wants to build in there together.
What would the site size be out there, Ryan?
It varies significantly just because of the area that we're requiring to have a conservation easement over the top of it in that wetland area. So that'd be a Nathan question, the zoning requirements.
There's no sewer and water out there?
No, they'll have septic and well.
And then just briefly switching to the commercial side, you have Dignacare, which is an assisted living facility. It says site plan approval, but has not completed civil plans, and that's located here, just north of Headwaters. And then we also have a Target recently received approval to amend their site plan to enhance and expand their order pickup. And then McDonald's will likely apply to refresh their facade and make some other site improvements. On the commercial side, that's not inclusive of if you have like a business move into an existing, building that's there, since we don't, if they don't trigger a city permit, those happen outside of sort of city purview. But that's just sort of an overall flavor of what we're seeing from a development standpoint, which you can see there's a lot of activity on the development side here in the city at this point.
Yeah, and under the yellow highlighted area on your screen, the parcel's right below that, a daycare is proposed.
It's nice to have all that progress faces out there. They're all in process, right? Okay, I'll stop there.
The 200, so I was up to like approximately 280 units plus whatever is approved for wherever Shadowwood Creek lands and whatever is final for the Teets Farm. 280 units, what's the estimated build out time for that? I said that number recently in a meeting, and whoever I was talking to thought I was just absolutely crazy that we had 280 units in process.
So
And
Hidden Creek,
they're
which
not
is
all-
over in Headwaters area, they're proposing to construct the project in 2 phases. So with that being said, I think they're in 7-year plus or minus, a couple years each way, total build out, in that area, because they won't bring on that second phase for actual construction until they have enough built out in the first phase. And so same with Birchwood Estates, they're proposing 2 phases as well, so that, you're probably the 7 plus or minus if, things continue the way they're going. Obviously, we've got interest rates going up. That potentially might slow some construction. Obviously, we're still cheaper than stuff south of us, but at some point there'll be, things will start balancing out again. Goodview Preserve, I would guess they're gonna construct in 2 phases because they're relying on the development to the south to basically feed the sewer for their second potential phase. And that's, really got 2 distinctive development areas to that long, skinny, long rectangle, where you got a lot of housing on the west side, then it's gonna be separated with the wetland complex in there, but connected with a 10-foot bituminous trail. So we're gonna have some very unique trails through this area between that development and Birchwood Estates. And we're lining the 4 quadrants of those 2 developments and the next 2 plots to the east on how we can encumber a bunch of parkland in that area. Then we actually have the trails leading up right to that, and we'll be going through that then eventually can continue eastward and, potentially someday out to Harrow Avenue, right? So it's gonna be a very nice connection all the way from Goodview through all that we've got planned, and that's been approved by Planning Commission at this point on concept approval for both. Birchwood Estates already received preliminary plat. They just submitted some revised plans that are very close to getting to the final plat. So that's kind of our next stage with Hidden Creek and Birchwood Estate is final plats. Hidden Creek development again over in Headwaters, they just resubmitted Friday, and their plans came along a lot further than they have been in the past. So both projects are kind of gearing up, then get final plat approval, then we'll prepare construction plans and then go up for bid, and maybe a early grading starts. I think both of these projects are going to be looking for from the city, which we then just typically have created a separate agreement for that so they can get going grading. And then maybe you're starting some of the pipe installation in July, August. And then some streets before winter and building permits throughout, winter time. So there's a lot of other land that's being asked about and poked at constantly. Like, it's just coming out of the woodwork everywhere and all kinds of people, so.
Important to keep that timeline in mind, that this sets the stage for, like you said, the next 7 years on some of these
And
projects.
there are a couple projects here and there, commercial-wise, we've lost to the corner of Columbus, but now that land's gone, they're just gonna be forced to continue eastward, but it's gonna probably line better, because then the Highway 97 corridor can get finished. We're working with MnDOT and planning for 2025 construction on that, from the Divergent Diamond to the first roundabout. So obviously, this corridor here needs significant upgrades, and upon that, you typically attract something instantly, and especially the area and footprint we are, that's close to the freeway, this type of a community, all the amenities and the schools and all that other stuff that's around here. So that stuff's just gonna get gobbled up very fast, I think. We've got some other stuff along that corridor that's knocking on, and you kind of wish it could just wait till 25, but we're having now cooperatively work together on some stuff as we're moving forward too, so. And then Everton Avenue's project with the county, we're targeting 2024 construction. So that'll be a total reconstruction from Broadway Avenue down to the south portion where they stopped. The county just picked a consultant last week for 11th Avenue, or County State Highway 32 here, 11th Avenue from Highway 61 all the way to the bridge. So those are 2 other significant transportation upgrades that are going on. And then, you got the whole Highway 8 thing that's just north of us, that's being led by Chisago County, that would have reconstruction of that all the way from basically the bridge overpass here on Highway 61, and then all the way up through Wyoming and up to Chisago City and at Carmel Avenue. So that'll obviously increase a lot of transportation, and they're planning on having some pedestrian facilities along that corridor too. So just a lot of regional transportation improvements in this area that becomes more attractive to manufacturers and the industrial side of things.
Helpful thing.
Oh,
Thank you
hopefully
for that
it's
detail.
bright and cheery.
Say that again?
It's bright and cheery. That was a good story.
Other questions or more specifics anybody has?
I know it's not Forest Lake, but what's going in on the northeast corner of Hornsby now?
Is that the Hy-Vee northeast
Right across the, or is it that?
on the
it's by
north side
way-
of 97?
The northeast side, right at the freeway.
Is that Hy-Vee?
It was supposed to be Hy-Vee. I don't know if there recent construction there. I
finally
didn't notice,
doing
but yeah, there was a plan for a Hy-Vee there.
I think a Caribou Coffee is going to
That might be-
somewhere in that quadrant too.
Yeah.
That kind of, they call it the
Cabin?
cabin, yeah.
I think that's going on the south side.
Other questions?
But I believe that truck stop is a Love's. And I just drove by one this morning coming back from South Dakota that I see that they're building them out on off of 94 intersections too. So, you know, there's all kinds of stuff coming in this area.
Makes sense to have the coffee shop on that side too. The Kodiak, or not, yeah, whatever.
All right. Staff updates, and I think we had specifically a question or update on the Excipio study, Dan?
President, members of the EDA, wanted to give the EDA an update on the Excipio study. If you recall back in October, November last year, Jeff from Excipio came in, gave a presentation on doing a specific study of the Headwaters parcel for development as a data center. And then at the end of the year, he retired and basically moved over to, I think, somewhere out on the East Coast to ride bike and have fun. I have reached out to his successor, who is basically taken over his account. Had a conversation with him regarding, you know, what they are from a capacity standpoint, what their 22 looked like. And they're looking, I mean, they're pretty booked up for the early part of 22, especially with Jeff leaving, that kind of shuffled their workload over. He is going to reach back out to me here about the end of second quarter to kind of see where they're looking at for getting us slotted in for a study here in 22. I also reached out to Dan Peterson and asked him for his professional opinion on what an Excipio study does, what the value that it adds to our parcel if we have one done. You know, part of the reason with Excipio before was that Jeff was always at data center talk, you know, always giving presentation on data centers. And as part of that, if he had completed a study, he'd always help market that piece as well. So you're not only getting the study component of it, you're also kind of getting that, you know, value added the marketing side of it as well. I'm not saying that the new contact person is not going to market it. I just kind of want to make sure before we do go forward with an Excipio study that Dan Peterson basically says that there is a lot of market viability on one of those studies. So waiting to hear back from him, and then also on the funding as well. But just wanted to give the EDA that update just to make it so you guys are aware that work is being done on the Excipio study. It hasn't fallen off the radar screen. Just looking at reconnecting back with Excipio probably here end of second quarter, early summer, and then kind of seeing where everything kind of shakes out there, and then we'll bring it all back, you know, based on that package. But really want to also get Dan Peterson's opinion on that as well, just to make sure that we're going to get a good return on that investment that we make for that study.
Is there a chance we can have those other two groups in front of us at some point in time so we can rehear, you know, where they leave off or what they think the status is or what they see on the horizon? They've had troubled times, but they've had enough time to, I don't know, tell us the story.
CBRE, the broker, to come in?
Yeah, they're supposedly expert, and then there's also evaluation, is there not going on about the data center specifically?
Yeah, I do have a conversation with Dan Peterson. I do say he does owe the EDA an update, just some market condition updates. So he does have that on his calendar. You know, we just haven't decided a date for a meeting time to make that work at this point. But I do have Dan Peterson coming back in to provide an update to the EDA on market conditions for data centers versus other uses, industrial uses, for example, because that has, after post-COVID, data centers are still, it's still a strong market, but what's really come out as a very strong market, not only in, you know, in the metro area, but nationwide, is the industrial warehousing space. That has come out as a very, very hot market segment. And those uses typically require large tracts of land in order to develop. And we have a large tract of land that is undeveloped right now. So he's going to come in. I have asked him to do, how does this position from a data center, from an industrial standpoint? The last just brief conversation I had with him, he said, you're basically, in his opinion, in a very good market position by looking at sort of both sides of it. He's actively marketing. He's not just looking at data centers for this site. He is actively marketing this across the segments, but he will come back to the EDA and give an update on what he's seen over the past 12 to 18 months on the
I'll be
conditions.
comfortable going for this, if in fact we can just review one, where we stand, and all that you've said at this.
Yeah,
point.
I'll accept that. And also with Excipio too. I mean, again, part of the reason on Excipio was you're going to get a very dialed down position of, the struggle with that headwire is if you're looking at from data centers, and Dan Peterson said this, he said, you probably don't need all 123, Excipio would help us identify if there's a 30 acre, a 40 acre, a 50 acre, what's the most prime spot in there, which then could potentially lead to, if you have other uses coming in, can you sort of carve that up and make it where it's the most, get the most bang for your buck in terms of, developing that. So there are some moving parts there as well, but just want the EDA to know that I'm still working with all the groups on that as well.
That'd require more manpower too. So it'd be a lot more employees.
Yeah, that is the industrial use definitely has a lot bigger workforce than, say a data center, which has a handful. However, though, if you look at data center sites, it's also that secondary and tertiary development that comes around data centers that does bring jobs to the area. So while the initial for one job set for one data center may be low, it does bring other jobs to the area as well in terms of what you see kick off from secondary and tertiary development.
Dan, anything else on the Excipio study? Sounds like we'll have Dan in sometime in upcoming meeting to give a broader 123 update.
Just trying to get everybody's
Fabulous.
schedule to align, which sometimes is
Understood.
like herding cats a little bit.
All right, downtown sculpture update?
Members of the EDA, it was come to my attention that if you recall back last fall, or spring, we purchased that fish sculpture for downtown, the kinetic fish sculpture. A couple members of the downtown beautification group had commented that it's a little small for the roundabout. It's a little bit tough to see. So they inquired about the possibility of having that sculpture moved to a location where it'd be a little bit easier to see. So we started looking at what are some other options for that particular piece. One option that came up and they presented was, can we put it out in front of City Hall here? So as traffic comes in and out of City Hall, they would be able to see the sculpture. It's walkable. It's not one where it probably is going to get lost. Like in the roundabout, it just tends to blend in a little bit based on the size there. So they are looking at the possibility of moving that sculpture. Don't need to determine a location at this point. I just wanted the EDA to be aware that that work is sort of happening in the background right now, of trying to figure out, is there a better location in the city for that sculpture? Public Works has said it's not an issue for them to make another mounting bracket for it, get that in the ground. But we just want to make sure that the next location is the permanent location, because we don't want to kind of keep moving this around multiple times, every year move it around. So the next location will have to go through a little bit more of a review process before we put it in the ground. But wanted the EDA aware that we are looking at possibly moving that sculpture out of that roundabout.
Right scale, better scale and less complex and more personal. It's a perfect place for it and a number of other things that could be scaled like that to fill that into a sculpture garden or something.
Here at City Hall?
Right here, that's a perfect scale for it. It's very diminutive and it needs to be seen up close.
Is there a reason why we didn't put it at the park? I think there was.
The reason, one of the
Lakeside
reasons
Memorial.
was in the park was if you put it sort of in an area where there isn't like here you have a little bit of a buffer where people aren't just gonna walk right into it. Like if you put it kind of stuck in the middle of the park, it was sort of a concern with just it being the size of it, you have the possibility of hitting it, easy to damage just because it was sort of there. That's one of the reasons why it did not get placed inside the park. And there wasn't really a spot inside Lakeside Memorial Park where it,
People climbing on it would be an issue too, I would
exactly.
think.
I'm open to putting it here at the city center. It's not the most high traffic area in the city. I think, Triangle Park comes to mind, but you've got highway traffic there. You might have the same challenge of it being kind of in the roundabout where it just kind of blends in, but in that triangle park that's right alongside 61, you know, some nice flowers that are planted there every year, and then people tend to walk through there as they're either stopping at the Dairy Queen, and oftentimes there's a pizza truck that's nearby that people kind of hang out in that park for. Throw that out as another option if.
I would suggest that for that area, given the complexity around it. But unless there's other things going to join it, I don't think it's going to be strong enough.
And I will say the one benefit we have this time of making location choice is that we actually have the sculpture. So we can, you know, kind of trial run it. I mean, obviously not leave it there overnight, but just take a look to see how does it scale in there. Because that was one of the concerns with the original roundabout was, is it going to fit? And the artist had given assurances that it was there, that it would scale into that space. But as it was installed, you can definitely tell it's tough to see from 61, and it's even tough to see when you're in the park.
Is there any talk about more of a permanent memorial where the stones have been put in place? I thought that was kind of the plan long-term. I don't know if that's still being.
Veterans Memorial?
Yes, yes.
Oh, we're at the stage right now, we're going to Parks, Lakes, and Trail. I'll be presenting next to them. Property that's right downtown next to the bathhouse. It's been claimed for quite a few years. So that's the actual memorial site, and now we have a design concept for that site. Funding. Trying to put a price tag to it right now. That we can have a good conversation about what it could. So yeah, that's in the works.
In that, maybe it doesn't fit there, but just if they're going to be redesigning some part of the park, maybe that could be incorporated, but maybe.
Well, the whole idea is to be at one with the park somehow, and yet still serve its purpose, which is to declare everything they've had going. That in a better place, and to make, or maybe central, maybe this is the start of public art in Forest Lake that has. And it's a great object in the park if you can keep it fairly. It stays transparent. I think the design is great.
Any other questions on that? Jenny, go ahead.
Just a comment to clarify, EDA didn't pay for that sculpture, that was Hallberg.
You are correct. Yeah, no, that's a great point. The EDA did not pay for that sculpture. That was a donation that came from the Hallberg Foundation. The EDA accepted that donation, then we paid for the sculpture using those funds. So there was not any general fund dollars that went to that. That was a full donation that paid for that sculpture and the installation.
Good. Other updates today? Anything else from a city perspective we want to update EDA on?
Yeah, I will. At council tonight, we'll be recommending a hiring for economic development coordinator or administrator. As you know, we had some difficulty recruiting and finding the right candidate. We were lucky this last time we had a candidate that stood above all of the rest that we interviewed. Her name's Abby Whitman, and she is a planning supervisor from the city of Stillwater.
Could I maybe give just a synopsis or an overview of what the job description is at this point?
Yeah, it's a combination of supporting EDA, which she will do. She'll also then begin to work on our planning and development, which we are very busy with, as was pointed out. So she'll be on that team to do that, and looking at hiring planners again and getting that function. Eventually, she'll be involved with, as most community development directors do, the building department and possibly parks and recreation as well. I can send you a job description. I have that if you wish.
That'd be nice. I'd appreciate that.
Not a problem.
Our most immediate plan, just clarity around for the members of the EDA is, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we will continue to use Bolton and Mink in their current role.
Yes.
Until we're at a spot of actually taking that back in-house.
Yeah, once Abby gets her feet wet and is here for a while, one of her tasks will be to evaluate what we should be doing with the planning function, as Donovan has, we are currently contracting that with Bolton and Meg. and whether that's a good idea to continue or what the time frame is to transition that back to a staff member. So that'll be her decision to try to guide us through as well. And take some pressure off of Dan on EDAs.
I mentioned that because that team is incredibly busy right now. We don't want to lose any momentum or have any sort of shift in direction, and so she comes in as
Yeah, right now we're.
community
we're-
development role, but
yeah, right now we're so busy with, as you saw, the 5 developments and things. We will keep Bolton and Meg. The staff development team is doing well. Plan commission is running very well. So right now we don't want to change course and screw that up too much. So.
questions on that? All right. Go ahead.
Since we have just a couple minutes, or ending a little earlier, just a couple things have come to my attention just by residents. One, I know that the question has been, part of the downtown plan is the boat launch, and who owns that, and who has ownership. The DNR gave us, I believe, a grant back in the day to do that. And so a couple of people brought to my attention about who's maintaining that, especially with the low water levels. It's pretty tough to use, and I don't know if there's a dredging program or something, but on that north dock, there's 2 docks that come out there, and on the north one, late last year, you couldn't even approach it with a pontoon to dock. So I don't know if I guess it goes back to the question, who's maintaining it? I know there's a kind of a joint ownership, or the DNR has some say because of the grant.
I'd have to go back to the grant. I thought the DNR maintains the access itself. Like if one of the ramps gets moved, I thought they came out and took care of that portion of it. I do know the Parks, Lakes and Trails Commission had looked into dredging at the park a couple of 3, 4, 5 years ago. I'd have to go back and figure out where they were. I know there was some issues with DNR issuing permits for the dredging. They were a little bit hesitant to do so because they were just they're protective of lakes. But I know they had done some work on the dredging component because of shallow water conditions on, it wasn't the north dock at the access, it was one of the public docks that was in there.
The dredging plan that I remember seeing was more towards the public docks, not so much the access points. It might be worth looking at.
Because I do believe as part of that original install, dredging did take place, because I believe that access is fairly deep comparative to the rest of what's around. And I'm just speaking from memory, it could have filled in from now. But
Yeah, it does drop and then comes back up. So there is literally a hole there, on both, but just maybe if that conversation could be had, it's an amenity that we want to.
We'll take a look and see who owns what and who does supposed to do what.
And then the question that someone asked, so I know during COVID, there was a time that we've been a little bit more laxed on food trucks and permits and the amount of time that they can stay in one location. And, obviously there's one that's at the pool site, and just that's been there continuous, it seems like, for well over a year. And just curious as to where we're at with that, and are we still lax based on, some of the issues that restaurants were having, and that had some people asking about those.
Yeah, we'll have to get back to you on that. I'm not sure.
we don't have a specific food truck ordinance here. I know we,
Yeah, we don't
again,
have an ordinance.
had started working on one 15, 16, but it never got past the draft phase, so we can dust that off as well.
Then maybe not so much food truck, I guess more just a temporary permit. At one point, I thought it was a 2-week period or a certain amount of days they had to move, then go to a different site, that they could go back to that site, but they couldn't be a continuous where it just parks there for 6 months or whatever.
Yeah, I think that may, if I recall, that may be a county ordinance that they were in, and I think that has to do with because the county, I believe, regulates the food
The health,
trucks.
yeah, they regulate the health part of the food trucks, but
I
as
think
far as
that may be a
location and
portion of it.
movement, we'll just have to look.
Like our zoning code, I feel like Donovan had said, as part of the zoning,
Yeah.
that they're allowed to stay for 30
Yeah,
days.
I know Donovan did some work, but before we tell you something, let's just take a look and see what it.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
Nanette had asked me to just provide a quick update for the chamber.
Fabulous, thanks.
Yeah, just really looking forward to kicking off the exciting spring fling, the big promotion for local, shop local businesses. Kicks off April 6th, running through April 16th. There's a number of local businesses that have gotten on board. Lots of giveaways and just different exciting things throughout that time frame, including pictures with the Easter Bunny and egg hunt and just shopping opportunities. So Nanette just wanted me to call that out, and really looking forward to driving that activity here locally as the weather hopefully warms up,
In theory,
right?
right. Thank you. All right, that being the end of our planned agenda, I will entertain a motion.
One just housekeeping update, just the meeting on the 11th, the EDA meeting will be canceled because that's local board of appeals, so that we're not going to run an EDA meeting that coincides with that. The next EDA meeting will be on the 18th. It's the downtown plan. Bruce will be out and talk about the downtown plan. That'll be at 6:30. So it'll be the same format as the last council workshop, or council workshop and EDA and downtown committee will get together. Same format as last time, where he'll reveal the next level of planning directives or executables.
All right, that being the end of our planned agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.